Humble widow buys desert ranch for $3,000, unaware of the $6 million hidden there. Jennifer Mitchell never imagined that the most desperate decision of her life would also become the most transformative. With only $3,000 in her bank account and 4 children to raise alone, she had to make an urgent decision before the rent money ran out completely. That's when she saw the ad in the local Amarillo newspaper that would change everything. A ranch in the interior of Texas, in the desert region, was being sold for exactly $3,000. The price was so low it seemed like a lie, but Jennifer didn't have the luxury of being picky. "Mom, are you sure this is a good idea?" asked Tyler, her eldest son of 12 years, as she dialed the realtor's number. "Son, we don't have many options," replied Jennifer, trying to sound more confident than she really felt. The realtor, a man named Robert, seemed reluctant from the very first moment he answered the phone. When Jennifer explained her interest in the property, there was a long pause before he responded. "Mom, look, I'll be frank with you. This property has some issues. It's been abandoned for a long time, has structural problems, it's very isolated. You wouldn't want something like that." But Jennifer had been through too much to give up easily. After losing her husband in a work accident 2 years prior, she had learned that life doesn't always offer ideal choices. Sometimes you have to work with what you have. "Mr. Robert, I would still like to see the property. Can I go tomorrow?" The realtor sighed on the other end of the line, as if wrestling with something internal. "All right, Mrs. Jennifer, but I'm warning you now, you might regret it. Let's meet at the Central Square in Plainview at 8 in the morning." That night, Jennifer could barely sleep. The children, 12-year-old Tyler, 10-year-old Brandon, 8-year-old Ashley, and 5-year-old Emma, were excited about the possibility of living on a farm. They didn't fully understand the gravity of the family's financial situation. "Mum, will there be animals there?" asked little Emma, her eyes shining with expectation. "I don't know, sweetie. We'll see tomorrow," replied Jennifer, smoothing the girl's blonde hair. The next morning, they caught the first bus to Plainview. It was a 3-hour trip from Dallas, where they were living in a tiny rented room that barely fit the whole family. The children pressed against the windows, fascinated by the landscape gradually changing from the big city to the countryside, then to the dry, dusty scrubland. Robert was at the square as agreed. He was a man in his 50s, with a dark complexion, a graying mustache, and a worried expression he couldn't hide. "Mrs. Jennifer," he approached when he saw the woman with 4 children getting off the bus. "Yes, that's me. These are my children." Robert greeted the children with a forced smile, but Jennifer noticed he remained uncomfortable. "Look, Mrs. Jennifer, during the trip here I kept thinking, are you sure you want to see this property? I can look for other options, maybe a bit more expensive but in better condition." "Mr. Robert, I can't afford more. If the ranch is so bad, why isn't the price even lower?" The realtor seemed to choke on the question. He looked around as if checking if anyone was listening to the conversation. "It's complicated, Mrs. Jennifer. Let's go there. You'll see with your own eyes." They got into the realtor's old pickup truck and followed a dirt road that seemed endless. The further they got from town, the more arid and desolate the land became. The children, who were initially excited about the adventure, began to grow quiet. "How much longer, Mum?" asked Ashley, starting to feel queasy from the curves of the dusty road. "We're almost there," replied Robert, but his voice didn't sound convincing. After almost an hour of travel, they finally arrived at the destination. Jennifer felt her heart tighten when she saw the property. It was even worse than she had imagined. The main house was practically in ruins, with part of the roof collapsed and the walls peeling from the relentless desert sun. There were other smaller buildings scattered across the land, all in a similar state of abandonment. "My God," murmured Jennifer, unable to hide her shock. The children got out of the pickup truck in silence, looking around with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The dry desert wind kicked up small clouds of red dust, creating an almost ghostly atmosphere. "Mrs. Jennifer, let's go," said Robert, clearly relieved by her reaction. "I told you it wasn't a good idea." But something strange happened at that moment. As she observed the ruined property under the golden late-afternoon light, Jennifer didn't feel only despair. There was something else, a feeling she couldn't explain. Perhaps it was the fact of finally having a space where the children could run freely, or perhaps it was simply the relief of not having to worry about rent at the end of the month. "How many acres is the property?" she asked, surprising the realtor. It's 15 acres, Mrs. Jennifer, but just look at the state of things." Jennifer walked to the porch of the main house. The floorboards creaked under her feet, but they seemed firm. She entered the house, ignoring Robert's protests. The interior was even more desolate than the exterior. There were old furniture covered in dust, cobwebs in every corner, and a smell of mold that permeated the air. But there was also something else. Large windows that let in plenty of natural light, a spacious area that could comfortably house the whole family, and a feeling of potential she couldn't ignore. "Mom, can we really live here?" asked Brandon, the second child, with a mixture of hope and doubt in his voice. "I'm thinking about it, son." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Robert appeared at the door, wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. "Mrs. Jennifer, please, let's be reasonable. This property has been abandoned for over 10 years. It's going to need a lot of money to become habitable." "Why was it abandoned for so long?" asked Jennifer, realizing this was the question that had been bothering the realtor from the start. The previous owner died without leaving clear heirs. It was tied up in court for a long time before they could release it for sale. That's why the price is so low. There was something in the way Robert spoke that didn't completely convince Jennifer. She had learned to be suspicious when people couldn't look directly into her eyes, and the realtor had been avoiding her gaze since they arrived. "What was the name of the previous owner?" Harold Thompson. He was a very private man, lived alone here for decades." Jennifer continued exploring the house. There were 3 bedrooms, a large living room, a spacious kitchen, and even a basement that could be used as a pantry. With some basic renovations, it would be perfectly livable. "Mr. Robert, I want to buy it." The realtor almost dropped the hat he was holding. "Mrs. Jennifer, are you serious? Look, I'm obligated by law to tell you everything. This property is going to be a lot of work, a whole lot." "Work is something that has never frightened me," replied Jennifer, with a determination that surprised even herself. The children gathered around their mother, sensing that an important decision was being made. "Mom, if you think it's better, I support it," said Tyler, trying to sound mature for his 12 years. "Me too," exclaimed Emma, always enthusiastic. Brandon and Ashley nodded, trusting their mother's judgment as they always did. Robert sighed deeply. "All right, Mrs. Jennifer, but I'm going to prepare a contract with all the liability clauses. You'll take the property as is, with no guarantees." "Perfect." The following week, Jennifer returned alone to sign the papers and receive the keys. Robert seemed even more nervous than on the first visit. "Mrs. Jennifer, there's still time to back out. I can return the full amount." "Mr. Robert, why are you so worried? Is there something you haven't told me?" The realtor hesitated for a long moment, looking around as if afraid of being overheard. "Look, Mrs. Jennifer, I'll be honest. There are some strange rumors about this property. The local folks avoid passing by here, especially at night." "What kind of rumors?" They say Harold hid a lot of money here before he died. Nonsense, of course, but some people have come searching the property over the years. That's why I didn't want you to buy it. It could be dangerous." Jennifer felt a chill in her stomach but tried not to show it. If they've already searched everything and found nothing, then it really is nonsense, isn't it? "Yeah, it must be. But even so, Mrs. Jennifer, you'll be very isolated here with the children. The nearest neighbor lives 15 kilometers from here." "Who is the neighbor?" "Mr. George Patterson. He's a good man, retired, lived in this region his whole life. If you need anything, you can look for him." After signing all the documentation, Jennifer took the keys and was alone on the property for the first time. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the dry wind blowing through the cracks of the old house. She decided to explore more thoroughly before bringing the children. She started with the main house, mentally noting everything that needed to be repaired or renovated. The list was long: roof, plumbing, part of the floor, painting, general cleaning. When she reached the basement, Jennifer turned on her phone's flashlight to illuminate the space. It was larger than she had noticed on the first visit, with a low ceiling but plenty of storage space. The floor was packed dirt, and the walls were stone. Perfect for keeping things cool during the intense desert heat. That's when she noticed something strange. On one of the walls, there were some stones that seemed slightly different from the others, as if they had been placed more recently. But it might have just been her imagination. The next day, she returned with the children and some basic belongings. They traveled by bus to Plainview and then caught a ride with a truck driver who was heading in the direction of the property. "You're going to live at the old Harold Ranch?" asked the driver, a friendly man named Dennis. "Yes, we bought the property." Dennis made a thoughtful expression. Harold was a strange man, very quiet, didn't talk to anyone in the area. When he died, some folks said he had a lot of money stashed away, but no one ever proved anything. "What did he die of?" asked Jennifer, trying to seem merely curious. "Heart attack, they say. Lived alone, so when they found the body, it had already been a few days." Poor guy. The children were quiet, listening to the adults' conversation. Tyler, always perceptive, asked a question that surprised Jennifer. If he had money stashed away, why did he live in that broken-down house? "Good question, kid," replied Dennis, laughing. "That's why I think it's just idle talk. When they arrived at the property, Dennis helped unload their things and offered to come back the following week with some tools Jennifer might need. Anything you need, Mrs. Jennifer. You can send a message through George, the neighbor. Everyone knows him around here." Finally alone in their new home, the family began organizing their few belongings in the chosen rooms. Jennifer stayed with Emma in the largest bedroom, while the boys settled in another room and Ashley took the third. The first night was difficult. The house made strange noises with the wind, and the children weren't used to the absolute silence of the desert. Emma woke up crying twice, afraid of the complete darkness. "Mom, it's too dark here," the girl complained. "It's just a matter of getting used to it, honey. Tomorrow will be better." But Jennifer was also having trouble sleeping. It wasn't just the new environment. There was something in the atmosphere of the house that made her uneasy. She couldn't stop thinking about the comments about the hidden money. The next day, the cleaning and organizing work began. The children helped as they could, sweeping dust and arranging the old furniture that was scattered throughout the house. It was Ashley who made the first important discovery. "Mom, there's a strange hole in the floor here," she shouted from the basement. Jennifer ran down to see what her daughter had found. Ashley was pointing to a corner of the basement where one of the floorboards was broken, revealing a hollow space underneath. "Be careful, honey. There might be critters in there," said Jennifer, moving Ashley aside and crouching down to examine it better. With a flashlight, she illuminated the space under the broken floorboard. There was definitely a hollow compartment there, but it was empty except for some spiderwebs. "It must have been a hiding place for supplies," she said, trying to sound casual. "Country folks always used to make these hiding spots to protect food from critters." But deep down, Jennifer knew that wasn't a hiding place for food. The size and shape suggested something very different. Over the following days, she took advantage of any moment when the children were distracted to examine the house and basement more thoroughly. She found 2 more loose floorboards, both covering similar empty compartments. A week after the move, they received their first visitor. An elderly man with white hair and sun-leathered skin appeared on the property in the late afternoon. He was riding a horse and carrying a bag of supplies. "Good afternoon," he shouted, still at a distance. "I'm George Patterson, your neighbor." Jennifer went out to greet him, followed by the children who were curious about the visitor. "Nice to meet you, Mr. George. I'm Jennifer Mitchell, and these are my children." George was a friendly man with bright blue eyes and a warm smile. He must have been about 65, but seemed in good health and spirits. "I brought a few things you might need," he said, handing the bag to Jennifer. "Flour, sugar, coffee. I know how hard it is at the beginning." "Thank you very much, Mr. George. You didn't have to." "Don't mention it. We're neighbors now. I have to help." The children quickly approached the horse, fascinated by the animal. George, noticing their interest, offered to teach them to ride. "Can I let them take a little ride? The horse is very gentle." Of course, they'd love that. While George entertained the children, Jennifer took the opportunity to ask a few questions about the area and about Harold, the previous owner. "Did you know Harold well?" "No is a strong word," replied George, placing Emma on the horse. "He was very private, hardly ever left the property. Sometimes I'd come by offering help, but he always politely declined." "Why do you think he lived so isolated?" George paused, as if choosing his words carefully. "Harold had some strange habits, Mrs. Jennifer. He worked a lot at night, always tinkering with something here on the property. During the day, you rarely saw him." "What kind of work?" "I never knew for sure. He had some tools. You'd always hear the noise of a sledgehammer, things like that. I thought he was fixing up the house, but just look at how it turned out." Jennifer felt a pang of curiosity. If Harold was always working with tools, especially at night, maybe he was building hiding places around the property. "Mr. George, do you believe those stories that he had money hidden?" The older man laughed, but Jennifer noticed something forced in the sound. "Oh, Mrs. Jennifer, those stories always exist when someone dies alone. Folks like to invent mystery." "But you never suspected anything?" George helped Tyler get up on the horse before answering. "Look, I'll be honest with you. Harold always paid his bills in cash, even the expensive ones. And once, about 5 years ago, I saw him going to Dallas with a very heavy suitcase. He came back the same day, but without the suitcase." Jennifer's heart raced, but she tried to keep her expression neutral. "It could have been anything." "It could, but at the time I thought it was strange because he never traveled. It was the first time I'd ever seen him leave the property." George stayed until nightfall, helping Jennifer fix a few things around the house and telling the children stories about the region. When he said goodbye, he made an offer that surprised Jennifer. "Mrs. Jennifer, if you need any heavier repairs here at the house, you can call me. I know a bit about construction. I can give you a hand." "Thank you very much, Mr. George. I'm still making a list of everything that needs fixing." "Great. And for anything, don't hesitate to reach out. Your house is now the only one with any activity for miles. It's good to have neighbors nearby." After he left, Jennifer put the children to bed and stayed alone in the living room, thinking about everything George had told her. The story of the heavy suitcase intrigued her especially. If Harold really had money hidden and had taken some of it to Dallas, it meant there could be even more money on the property. She decided that the next morning she would do a more systematic search, taking advantage of the fact that the children could play outside while she investigated the house. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like, and especially to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. The next day, Jennifer woke up determined to discover if there was anything hidden on the property. After breakfast, she sent the children to play in the backyard, warning them not to wander too far from the house. "Tyler, you keep an eye on the younger ones, okay?" "You got it, Mom." Jennifer began her investigation in the basement, examining every inch of the stone walls. She tapped lightly on the stones, listening to see if any sounded hollow. After an hour, she hadn't found anything different from the empty compartments she already knew about. It was then she decided to examine the floorboards more systematically. Some planks were more worn than others, and she realized that could mean they were removed more frequently. Using a kitchen knife, she began testing the planks, looking for the ones that were looser. The 5th plank she tested gave slightly when she applied pressure. Jennifer's heart pounded. Carefully, she pried at the plank until she could remove it completely. Underneath was another compartment, but this one wasn't empty. There was a metal box, about the size of a shoebox, wrapped in thick plastic. Jennifer looked around, making sure she was alone, and then picked up the box. It was heavy. With trembling hands, she removed the plastic and opened the lid. What she saw took her breath away. The box was full of money, stacks and stacks of $100 bills, carefully organized and seemingly in perfect condition. Jennifer had never seen so much money all at once in her entire life. She quickly closed the box and wrapped it again in plastic, putting it back in the compartment and repositioning the board. Her heart was beating so hard she was afraid the children might hear it from upstairs. "Mom, are you okay down there?" yelled Tyler from the kitchen. "Yes, son. I'm just organizing some things," she replied, trying to keep her voice normal. Jennifer came up from the basement with her legs trembling. She needed a few minutes to process what she had found. She sat in the kitchen and tried to calculate how much money was in the box. There were at least 50 bundles, maybe more. If each bundle had $100 bills, she was talking about a lot of money. A whole lot of money. But then, reality hit her like a bucket of cold water. If this money was hidden, it probably wasn't legal. And if other people knew of its existence, her family could be in danger. For the rest of the day, Jennifer could barely concentrate on anything else. She watched the children playing and wondered what she should do. Tell someone. Return it. To whom? What if it was legal money that Harold had saved his entire life? That night, after putting the children to bed, she went back to the basement. This time, she removed the box completely and took it to her bedroom. She locked the door and by flashlight examined the contents more closely. There were approximately 50 bundles of bills, each with $100 bills, $500,000, a fortune for a family like hers. But along with the money, there were also some folded papers. Jennifer carefully opened the papers. They were old documents, some typed, others handwritten. One seemed to be a list of numbers and names, but she couldn't understand the meaning. Another was a kind of receipt, dated 15 years ago, from a company she had never heard of. The third paper left her cold. It was a letter handwritten in cursive, addressed to whom it may concern. Jennifer read the contents with growing apprehension. If anyone finds this money, they need to know that part of it does not rightfully belong to me. I worked honestly all my life, but in the end, I made a mistake that haunts me every day. The money here came from two sources: my personal savings, which I managed to accumulate over 40 years of work, and funds I borrowed from other people without permission. I couldn't return it before I fell ill, and now I don't know if I'll have time. If someone finds this money, please try to figure out what is rightfully mine and what should be returned. The letter was signed by Harold Thompson and dated just 3 months before his death. Jennifer sat on the bed, trembling. The situation had become infinitely more complicated. Harold was admitting that part of the money had been stolen, but he didn't explain from where or how much. How could she know what was legal and what wasn't? She put everything back in the box and hid it in her closet under some clothes. She couldn't sleep the rest of the night, thinking about all the implications of what she had discovered. The next morning, Jennifer was exhausted and nervous. The children noticed something was different. "Mom, did you sleep badly?" asked Ashley during breakfast. "I'm just worried about some house repairs, honey." "We can help," offered Brandon, always willing. "For now, everything's fine. You just worry about playing and having fun." But Jennifer knew she needed to make a decision quickly. She couldn't keep money that was possibly stolen, but she also didn't know how to return it without getting into trouble. That's when she decided to seek professional help. She took the bus to Plainview and looked for the town's law office. It was a small office with only 2 lawyers. "Doctor, I have a hypothetical question," she said to Dr. Michael, a young man who attended to her. "Of course, Mrs. Jennifer. If a person finds an abandoned sum of money, what is the legal procedure?" The lawyer looked at her curiously. "It depends on the circumstances. If it's found lost, it must be handed over to the police authority. If it's an inheritance without a will, it has to go through probate. If the origin is dubious, it can be confiscated by the Internal Revenue Service. And if the person who found it doesn't know the origin, then the situation gets complicated. The person could be accused of receiving stolen property, even if innocent. It's always better to notify the authorities." Jennifer left the office more confused than before. Notifying the authorities could result in losing the money completely, but not notifying could be a crime. When she returned home, she found George talking with the children in the backyard. He had brought some fruit and was teaching the boys how to play dominoes. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Jennifer. How was the city?" "Everything's fine, Mr. George. Just took care of some business. I was thinking about our conversation yesterday, about the repairs the house needs. I can take a look at the roof tomorrow if you'd like." Jennifer hesitated. If George were to work on the roof, he would have access to the entire house. It wasn't that she distrusted him, but the situation was very delicate. "Actually, Mr. George, I'm still organizing the priorities. Maybe it's better to leave it for next week." George seemed slightly surprised by the answer, but didn't insist. "Of course, Mrs. Jennifer. No problem. But if you change your mind, just let me know." After he left, Jennifer noticed the children were quieter than usual. "What's wrong, kids? Did something happen?" "Mum," said Tyler with a worried expression, "George asked some strange questions." "What kind of questions?" "He wanted to know if we had found anything interesting in the house, and he asked if you were doing a lot of work in the basement." Jennifer felt a chill down her spine. "And what did you say?" "That we hadn't found anything out of the ordinary. Just a normal house," replied Brandon. "But he kept asking about holes in the ground and things like that." Jennifer tried to stay calm, but it was clear that George knew more about the property than he was letting on. Maybe he knew about the hidden money. Maybe he even knew where it was. "Kids, you can't tell anyone about our life here at home, okay? Not Mr. George or anyone else. These are our family matters." "Don't worry, Mom," said Tyler, noticing the seriousness in his mother's tone. That night, Jennifer decided to do a more thorough search of the property. If there was one hidden box, there could be others, and if George was interested in what they might have found, it meant he expected to find something. After putting the children to bed, she took a strong flashlight and began a systematic search. First, she checked all the compartments in the basement she hadn't examined yet. She found 3 more loose floorboards, but all covering empty spaces. Next, she examined the kitchen. Nothing unusual. In the living room, she tested the floorboard by floorboard. It took almost 2 hours, but she found nothing. It was when she decided to check the bedrooms. In the children's room, nothing. In her room, also nothing. But when she got to the empty room at the back of the house, she found something interesting. One of the walls had a slight difference in the color of the plaster, as if it had been patched recently. Jennifer tapped lightly on the wall and heard a slightly hollow sound. Using a knife, she began carefully scraping the plaster in the suspicious area. After a few minutes, she managed to open a small hole. Through it, she could see there was an empty space behind the wall. Continuing to work carefully so as not to make too much noise, she managed to open a hole large enough to put her hand through. Inside the space, her fingers touched something solid. It was another box, larger than the first. Carefully, she managed to pull the box out. It was heavier than the first, and when she opened it, she almost fainted. There was much more money in this box. Stacks and stacks of bills, carefully organized and wrapped in plastic, and along with the money, more papers. Jennifer took everything to her room and began to examine the documents by flashlight. One was a list of names with amounts beside them, another appeared to be some kind of contract or agreement, and the third was another letter from Harold. This letter was longer and more detailed. "I worked as an accountant for the St. Francis Mining Company for 20 years. When the company began having financial problems 15 years ago, the owner asked me to borrow the money from the Employee Retirement Fund to cover some urgent expenses. He said it would only be temporary, that he would return it all in a few months. But the company went bankrupt, and the money was never returned. 43 employees lost their life savings. I kept the money because I didn't know what to do. I tried a few times to return it to the families, but I was afraid of being arrested." Attached is a list of all those affected and the amount each had in the fund. "If someone finds this money, please do what I didn't have the courage to do. Return it to these families. They deserve it." Jennifer sat on the bed, her legs weak. The situation had become even more complicated. Now she knew exactly where the money came from and to whom it should be returned, but how to do it without getting into legal trouble. She examined the list of names. She recognized some surnames of families from the area. If these people still lived around there, it might be possible to find them. But how to explain how she had gotten the money? Jennifer counted the bills in this second box. There were approximately $800,000. Together with the $500,000 from the first box, it totaled over $1 million. An amount that could transform her family's life, but that belonged to other people who also needed it. She couldn't sleep the rest of the night, thinking about all the complications of the situation. By morning, she was exhausted and confused. The children noticed again that something was wrong. "Mum, are you sick?" asked Emma, worried. "No, honey, I just have a headache." "Do you want me to make some tea?" offered Ashley, always helpful. "That would be good, thank you." While Ashley prepared the tea, Jennifer tried to organize her thoughts. She needed help, but didn't know who to trust. George clearly knew something, but she wasn't sure of his intentions. The lawyer had made it clear the legal situation was complicated. That's when she had an idea. What if she sought out some of the families on the list directly? She could probe the situation without revealing she had found the money, at least initially. She decided to start with a name she recognized, Dorothy Harris. There was a Harris family that lived in Plainview and had a small grocery store in town. "Tyler, can you watch the boys today? I need to go to town to take care of some things." "Sure, Mom. But are you going to be okay? You look worried." "I'm fine, son. It's just some annoying paperwork I have to sort out." Jennifer took the bus to Plainview and went straight to the Harris grocery store. It was a small establishment, typical of the countryside, with a little bit of everything. "Good morning," she greeted the woman behind the counter, a lady of about 60 with graying hair. "Good morning. Are you Dorothy Harris?" "Yes, I am. Can I help you with something?" Jennifer hesitated, not knowing exactly how to start the conversation. "Actually, I'm doing research on families from the region who worked for the St. Francis Mining Company. Did you or anyone in your family work there?" Dorothy Harris's face closed off immediately. "Why do you want to know?" "It's for a project about the history of the region," Jennifer lied. "I'm talking to several families. My husband worked there, yes. But I don't like to talk about it. It was a very bad time for our family. May I ask what happened?" Dorothy Harris looked around, making sure there were no other customers in the store. "My dear, my husband worked 20 years for that company. He contributed every month to the pension fund. When the company went bankrupt, we lost everything, over $40,000 that he had saved his whole life." Jennifer felt her heart tighten. $40,000 was exactly the amount listed next to Dorothy Harris's name on Harold's list. "And you never managed to get the money back?" "Never. We tried through the courts, but they said the company had no more assets to pay the debts. The accountant disappeared and no one ever heard from him again." "Accountant?" "Harold Thompson. He vanished right after the company closed. Many people think he ran off with the money from the fund, but no one could ever prove it." Jennifer was hearing confirmation of everything she had read in Harold's letter, and she was seeing on Dorothy Harris's face the pain of a family that had lost the security of a lifetime. "And how did you manage to move forward?" "It was very difficult, my dear. Very difficult indeed. My husband fell ill from grief, died 5 years later. I had to work as a housekeeper to raise my children. To this day, we feel the weight of that loss." Jennifer left the grocery store with a heavy heart. Now she was absolutely certain the money needed to be returned to these families. But how? She decided to look for one more family on the list before heading home. The second name was Robert Mitchell, who lived on a small rural property near Plainview. Jennifer got a ride with a merchant who was heading in the direction of the property. Robert Mitchell was a man of about 50, thin and with a tired appearance. When she explained the reason for her visit, he also became visibly uncomfortable. "The mining company was the ruin of my family," he said bluntly. "I lost $50,000 that were meant to buy a house in the city for my children to study. And what happened after? My children had to stop their schooling. My wife got depressed. I had to sell part of the land to avoid hardship. To this day, we haven't really recovered." Jennifer was seeing a pattern. All the families had been deeply affected by the loss of the money, and many of them were still suffering the consequences 15 years later. When she returned home in the late afternoon, she was determined to find a way to return the money. But she needed to do it carefully, without getting into legal trouble and without putting her family at risk. The children greeted her excitedly, telling her about their day playing in the backyard and exploring the property. "Mum, we found some really pretty rocks behind the house," said Brandon, showing some colorful stones. "And Tyler taught us how to make a kite with old newspaper," added Ashley. "That's great, kids. I'm glad you had fun." But Jennifer's mind was elsewhere. She needed a plan, and she needed to decide if she could trust George or not. The next morning, she made a decision. She would tell George everything and see his reaction. If he really was a trustworthy person, he could help. If he wasn't, at least she would know where she stood. When George appeared for his morning visit, Jennifer invited him for a private conversation. Mr. George, I need to talk about something very serious. But first I need to know, did you know there was money hidden on this property? George stopped drinking his coffee and looked her directly in the eyes. I suspected it, Mrs. Jennifer. Harold was always very mysterious and some things didn't add up. Why are you asking? Because I found the money. George's face went through several expressions in a few seconds: surprise, curiosity, worry. Found it where? Hidden in compartments around the house, and along with the money I found letters explaining its origin. Jennifer told George the whole story: Harold's letters, the list of names, her visit to the affected families. George listened to everything in silence, with an increasingly grave expression. Mrs. Jennifer, this is very serious. If this money is from the mining company's retirement fund, half the families in this region have a right to it. I know. That's why I'm telling you. I don't know what to do. How many names are on the list? 43. And how much money is it? More than $1 million. George let out a low whistle. That's a lot of money, Mrs. Jennifer, and a lot of families who have been in need for 15 years. Do you think I should go to the authorities? Look, I'll be honest, if you go to the authorities, this money will be tied up in bureaucracy for years. And knowing how things work, it's possible that in the end, no one gets anything. Then what do you suggest? George was thoughtful for a few minutes. Do you trust me, Mrs. Jennifer? I don't know if I have a choice. Then I'll make a proposal. What if we organize the return of the money ourselves? I know all these families personally. I can help get in touch with them and explain the situation. But how will we explain where the money came from? We'll tell the truth, that you bought the property, found the money hidden along with Harold's letters, and want to return it to the rightful owners. Jennifer thought about the proposal. It made sense, but there were still risks. What if someone thinks we were involved from the beginning? That's exactly why we have to do everything transparently, with witnesses and documentation. And rest assured, the families will be so happy to get the money back they won't ask complicated questions. Are you sure you know all these families? I do, Mrs. Jennifer. I've lived in this region for 60 years. I saw the suffering each of these families went through when they lost the mining company money. Jennifer decided to trust George. She didn't have many alternatives, and he seemed genuinely concerned with doing the right thing. All right, Mr. George, but how will we do it? First, we'll organize all the documentation, Harold's letters, the list of names, everything. Then we'll have a meeting with some of the main families and explain the situation. If they agree with the process, we move forward. And the children? They can't know anything about this yet. I agree. It's better to keep the children out of this situation until everything is settled. In the following days, Jennifer and George worked together, organizing all the documentation. George brought updated information on the families on the list, where they were living, how many still lived in the region, which ones had passed away. According to my research, explained George, 31 of the 43 families still live in the region. Some moved to other towns, but it's possible to find them. And the ones who passed away? 5 of the beneficiaries have died, but they all left widows or children who could receive the inheritance. They decided to start with a small meeting, inviting just 5 families to explain the situation and see their reaction. The meeting was scheduled for a Sunday afternoon at George's property. Jennifer was extremely nervous. What if the families didn't believe the story? What if they thought she was involved in the original theft? The 5 families arrived at the appointed time. Dorothy Harris, Robert Mitchell, Charles Anderson, widower of one of the beneficiaries, Linda Patterson, daughter of another beneficiary, and Joseph Davis. George began the meeting by explaining who Jennifer was and how she had bought the property from Harold. Then Jennifer told them about the discovery of the money and showed the letters left by Harold. The silence in the room was tense as people read the documents. Jennifer watched their faces, trying to guess their reactions. It was Dorothy who spoke first. Mrs. Jennifer, are you saying Harold left instructions to return our money? Exactly. He admits in the letter that he took the money from the fund and wants it returned to the rightful families. After 15 years, said Robert bitterly. 15 years we suffered because of that money. I understand your anger, said Jennifer. But the important thing now is that the money can be returned. Charles Anderson, a man of about 70, rose from his chair. Mrs. Jennifer, with all due respect, how can we be sure this money is really ours? How do we know you're not making this story up? The question Jennifer most feared had been asked, but George intervened. Charles, you've known me for over 30 years. I vouch for Mrs. Jennifer's honesty. And besides, look at these documents. There are details only Harold could have known. Linda Patterson, a woman of about 40, examined the list again. The amount here next to my father's name is correct. He always said he had contributed exactly $32,000 to the fund. Joseph Davis agreed. Mine is correct too, $48,000. Gradually, suspicion gave way to relief and emotion. Dorothy began to cry. Mrs. Jennifer, you can't imagine what this money means to our family. After my husband died, I thought I'd never see that amount again. But how will the distribution be done? Asked Robert, ever practical. George presented the plan he and Jennifer had drawn up. We'll do everything documented and transparent. Each family will receive the amount on the list upon signing a receipt. We'll also prepare a document explaining the whole situation so there are no doubts in the future. And what does Mrs. Jennifer get out of this? Asked Charles, still suspicious. The question took Jennifer by surprise. She hadn't thought about gaining anything from the situation. I don't want to gain anything, she replied honestly. I just want to do what's right. But Mom, said Linda, you bought the property without knowing about the money. You have a right to keep it. No, Linda. This money belongs to you. Harold's letters make that very clear. The meeting continued for another 2 hours, discussing all the details of the process. In the end, the 5 families agreed to support the plan and help contact the other families on the list. Mrs. Jennifer, said Dorothy as they were leaving, may God bless you for the stance you're taking. There are many people who would keep the money and not tell anyone. I couldn't live in peace knowing this money isn't mine. In the following days, news of the discovery spread quickly through the region. George and the 5 families from the first meeting took charge of contacting all the others on the list. The reaction was always the same: surprise, emotion, and gratitude. Many families had lost hope of ever recovering the money lost 15 years ago. Jennifer organized the distribution process to take place in 2 weeks. This would give time to locate all the families and prepare all the necessary documentation, but 3 days before the scheduled distribution date, something unexpected happened. Jennifer was at home with the children when an unfamiliar car stopped in front of the property. 2 people got out, a man in a suit and a woman also dressed formally. Good afternoon, said the man approaching. We're looking for Mrs. Jennifer Mitchell. That's me. Can I help you? We're from the Internal Revenue Service. We received an anonymous tip that there is movement of undeclared money on this property. Jennifer felt the world spin. Someone had reported the situation to the IRS. I don't understand. What kind of tip? Information that you found a significant amount of money on the property and are planning to distribute it without the proper legal procedures. But I'm not doing anything wrong. The money isn't mine. I'm returning it to the rightful owners. Mom, we understand your version, but we need to verify the entire situation officially. We will have to seize the money until the investigation is concluded. Jennifer felt desperate. All the work of the last few weeks, all the family's hope, could be lost because of an anonymous tip. Please let me explain the whole situation. I have documents that prove everything. The IRS agents agreed to hear the explanation. Jennifer told the whole story from the beginning, showed Harold's letters, the list of names, and explained the process she was organizing with George. Ma'am, your version is plausible, said the female agent, after examining all the documents. But even so, we will have to follow legal procedures. The money will be temporarily seized until the situation is officially clarified. How long could that take? 6 months to 2 years, depending on the complexity of the investigation. Jennifer nearly collapsed. 2 hours later, the agents left the property, carrying all the boxes of money and a copy of all the documents. The only things they left were Harold's original letters. When George learned what had happened, he was outraged. Someone made a bad faith report, Mrs. Jennifer. Someone who doesn't want this money returned to the families. But who would do such a thing? I don't know. But we'll find out. The news of the seizure spread quickly, causing outrage among the families who were waiting to receive the money. Many of them blamed Jennifer, thinking she had done something wrong. "Mrs. Jennifer," said Robert Mitchell, visibly irritated, "you should have sought legal help from the start. Now it might be that we never see that money again. Robert, I did what I thought was best. There was no way to predict this situation." But not everyone reacted negatively. Dorothy Harris and Linda Patterson continued to support Jennifer, recognizing that she had tried to do the right thing. "People are angry, Mrs. Jennifer, but not at you," said Linda. "It's at the situation. We already lost this money once. Losing it again is very painful." In the following weeks, Jennifer tried to continue her normal life, but the situation was very stressful. The children sensed something serious was happening, especially after the visit from the federal agents. "Mom, are you in trouble with the law?" asked Tyler, direct as always. "No, son. It's just a mix-up that will be resolved soon." "But why did those men in suits come here?" Jennifer decided to tell a simplified version of the truth to the children. "Remember when you found those holes in the floor of the house? Well, the previous owner had hidden some things there. Now the authorities need to verify those things." "What kind of things?" asked Ashley, curious. "Important documents. Nothing you need to worry about." But Jennifer was very worried. If the investigation concluded she had done something wrong, she could face serious legal problems. And worse, the families might never receive the money that was rightfully theirs. It was George who brought the first clue about who might have made the report. "Mrs. Jennifer, I've been talking to some people, and I discovered something interesting. You know the broker who sold the property to you? Robert, what about him? He's been asking questions around the region about the situation with the money, and some people said he seemed very interested in knowing details about what was going to happen. Do you think he was the one who reported it?" "It's possible. Maybe he knew from the beginning that there was money hidden on the property and got angry about not getting a share." Jennifer remembered how Robert had tried to dissuade her from buying the property and how nervous he had been throughout the entire sales process. But why didn't he take the money before selling the property? Maybe he didn't know where it was hidden, or maybe he was afraid to handle it alone. The theory made sense, but it didn't change the current situation. The money was seized and could be tied up in the courts for years. It was then that Jennifer had an idea. "Mr. George, what if we looked for a specialized lawyer to handle the case? Someone who could speed up the process?" "That's a good idea, but a good lawyer is expensive, Mrs. Jennifer. The families could contribute to pay the fees. After all, they also have an interest in the case being resolved quickly." George thought the suggestion was excellent. They organized a new meeting with the families to discuss hiring a lawyer. This time the meeting was tense. Some families were still angry with Jennifer, thinking she had messed everything up. Others were willing to support any initiative that could speed up the process. "Folks," said George, trying to calm tempers, "fighting among ourselves won't solve anything. The important thing now is to work together to get the money back." "But why didn't Mrs. Jennifer go to the authorities from the start?" complained Charles Anderson. "Because she wanted to do what she thought was best for you," answered Linda Patterson. "She could have kept the money and not told anyone." "Look," Jennifer interjected, "I understand you're frustrated, I am too. But now the situation is this. The money is seized and could sit for years if we don't do something." "What do you suggest?" "That we hire a specialized lawyer to handle the case. Someone who understands tax law and can prove we were acting in good faith." After much discussion, 15 families agreed to contribute to pay the lawyer's fees. Each family would contribute $300, totaling $4,500. George knew a lawyer in Dallas who had experience with similar cases. Dr. Frank Wilson was a specialist in tax law and had previously worked with situations involving money seized by the Internal Revenue Service. "Dr. Frank," explained George over the phone, "we have a somewhat complicated situation here. A lady found hidden money on a property she bought, discovered the money belonged to other people, and tried to return it. The IRS seized everything because of an anonymous report." "I understand that type of case is complex but not uncommon. I'll need to analyze all the documentation." Dr. Frank agreed to travel to the region and meet with Jennifer and the families involved. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. Meanwhile, Jennifer tried to maintain a normal routine with the children, but she was visibly stressed. Tyler, the oldest, realized the situation was more serious than his mother had admitted. "Mom, could you go to jail because of this mess?" Tyler's direct question caught Jennifer by surprise. "Why are you thinking about that, son?" "Because I heard people in town saying that when the Internal Revenue Service seizes money, it's because the person did something wrong." Jennifer sat down next to her son and decided to be more honest. "Tyler, the situation is like this. I found some money in the house that belonged to other people. I tried to return it to them, but the authorities thought I should have looked for them first. Now they are checking if I did something wrong." "And did you?" "No, son. I just wanted to do what was right." "Then there's no problem. If you didn't do anything wrong, they'll give the money back, and that's it." Tyler's trust in the justice system was touching, but Jennifer knew things weren't always that simple. Dr. Frank arrived in the region on a Thursday and spent 2 days analyzing all the documentation and listening to the accounts of everyone involved. His first impression was positive. "Mrs. Jennifer, from what I see here, you acted in good faith and intended to do the right thing. The problem is that American law requires situations like this to be reported to the authorities before any action." "But if I had reported it, what would have happened?" "The money would have been seized anyway, but the process would be faster because it would have been voluntary. Now, with the anonymous tip, the situation becomes more complicated. How long could it take to resolve? If we work well, 6 months to a year. But I need to be honest, there's always the risk that part of the money could be confiscated by the federal government." "How so?" "If we can't completely prove the legal origin of all the money, the government can keep a percentage. It's a penalty for not following the correct procedures." The news left everyone discouraged. Dorothy Harris started crying again. "Doctor, after 15 years of waiting, we could lose the money again. I won't lie to you, that risk exists, but we'll do everything in our power to prevent that from happening." Dr. Frank explained the strategy he intended to use. "First, we'll prove that Mrs. Jennifer acted in good faith. Harold's letters are important evidence, as is the fact that she voluntarily revealed the existence of the money and tried to return it. Second, we'll demonstrate that the families have a legal right to the money. The list left by Harold, along with the employment documents from that time, should be enough. Third, we'll try to identify who made the anonymous tip and what the motivation was. If we can prove it was made in bad faith, that strengthens our case." "How are we going to find out who reported it?" "I'll file a court request to access the tip's data. It's a lengthy process, but it's possible." Dr. Frank returned to Dallas to start working on the case, leaving everyone with a mix of hope and apprehension. At least now they had a competent professional working for them. In the following weeks, life on the property continued, but the situation was weighing on the whole family. The children started asking more questions, and Jennifer realized she couldn't completely hide her stress. "Mom," said Ashley one night after dinner, "are we going to have to leave the house?" "Why are you thinking that, honey?" "Because you've been very worried, and sometimes I hear you crying in the room." Jennifer didn't know the children had noticed so much. She decided it was time to be more open about the situation. "Look, kids, I'm going to tell you what's really happening. When we bought this house, I found a sum of money that the previous owner had hidden. I discovered this money belonged to other families, so I tried to return it. But the authorities thought I should have looked for them first. Now they're checking if I did something wrong." "Is Mom going to be arrested?" asked Emma, her eyes full of tears. "No, sweetheart. I didn't do anything wrong. It's just a matter of time until everything is resolved." "What if they make us leave the house?" "That won't happen, Emma. This house is ours. We bought it properly." But internally, Jennifer also had this worry. If the process didn't go well, she could face problems that would affect the whole family. It was 2 weeks later when Dr. Frank brought the first news. "Mrs. Jennifer, I've obtained some important information. First, I identified who made the anonymous report." "Who was it?" "Robert Harris, the broker who sold the property to you." "I knew it," exclaimed George. "That man had a look about him like he was hiding something." "Second," continued Dr. Frank, I gained access to the St. Francis Mining Company records. All the data matches the list left by Harold. This strengthens our case a lot. And what's the next step? We're going to file a legal petition asking for the release of the money for immediate distribution to the families. I'll argue that keeping the money seized is causing unjust harm to the true owners. What are the chances? They've improved a lot. I'd say we have a 70% chance of success. The news lifted everyone's spirits. For the first time in 2 months, there was a real prospect of resolution to the situation. But the legal process is slow, and it took another 3 months for the petition to be reviewed. During this period, Jennifer gradually managed to return to a normal routine. The children adapted well to life on the rural property, and she managed to make some basic repairs to the house with the money left over from selling her previous belongings. George continued to be a great support, not just in the legal matter, but also in day-to-day life. He taught the boys how to care for a small vegetable garden and brought some chickens so the family could have fresh eggs. "Mrs. Jennifer," he said one day while they were fixing a fence, "regardless of how this money story ends, you did the right thing." Sometimes I wonder if I shouldn't have just kept the money and not told anyone. If you had done that, would you be able to sleep peacefully at night? Jennifer thought about the question. No. Knowing that money belonged to families who have been struggling for 15 years, I couldn't use a single cent. Then you did what you had to do. The rest we can't control. It was a simple philosophy, but it helped Jennifer find peace with her decisions. In December, almost 6 months after the seizure, Dr. Frank called with important news. "Mrs. Jennifer, I have good news and bad news. You can start with the good. The court accepted our petition and ordered the release of 90% of the money for distribution to the families. And the bad news? 10% will be withheld by the federal government as a fine for the incorrect procedures. But considering it could have been much worse, it's an excellent result." Jennifer was torn between relief and frustration. It was unfair that the families would lose 10% of the money because of a procedural error, but at least they would receive most of it. When can the distribution happen? In 2 weeks. The court will appoint an official to oversee the entire process and ensure each family receives the correct amount. The news spread quickly through the region. The families who had lost hope became excited again. This time the distribution would be official and final. Jennifer organized a final meeting to explain the details. Most families were satisfied with the outcome, despite the loss of the 10%. "Mrs. Jennifer," said Dorothy Harris, "even losing 10%, it's still 90% more than we had before. And this was only possible because of your honesty." "That's true," agreed Robert Mitchell, who had completely changed his position on Jennifer. "You could have kept everything and no one would have known." The official distribution took place on a Saturday morning at the municipal school in Plainview. The court officer brought the money in sealed bags and oversaw the entire delivery process. Each family signed a receipt confirming receipt of the amount, and everything was officially documented. In the end, 31 families had received their funds back, totaling more than $900,000. Jennifer observed the people's emotions as they received the money. Dorothy Harris cried with happiness. Robert Mitchell hugged his wife, both in tears. Linda Patterson immediately called her children to tell them the news. That's what made it all worthwhile, thought Jennifer. After the distribution, many families approached Jennifer to thank her personally. Some offered part of the money as a token of gratitude, but she refused all offers. "This money is yours. It always was. I just did what any honest person would do." Charles Anderson, who had been one of the most critical at the beginning, approached her at the end. "Mrs. Jennifer, I owe you an apology. At first I thought you were involved in something suspicious. Now I see you are a person of character. No need to apologize, Mr. Charles. It's natural to be suspicious when you've lost money once. You gave hope back to many people. That is priceless." When she returned home that night, Jennifer was finally able to tell the whole truth to the children. They listened to the full story with fascination and pride in their mother. "Mom, you're a heroine," exclaimed Emma, her eyes shining. "No, dear, I just did what was right." "But not everyone would do that," said Tyler, mature for his 12 years. "Some people would have kept the money." "And that's why I'm proud of you," replied Jennifer. "Because I know if you were in my place, you'd do the same thing." In the following months, life on the property normalized. With the renovations Jennifer managed to do with her savings, the house became comfortable and welcoming. The children adapted completely to life in the desert and made friends with other children in the region. George became practically a member of the family, visiting almost every day and helping with the work on the property. He taught the boys to ride horses and the girls to care for the medicinal plants that grew naturally in the area. "Mrs. Jennifer," he said one evening as they watched the children playing in the backyard, "have you thought about what you'll do when they grow up?" "What do you mean?" "I mean you're still young, 35, you can't spend your whole life alone." Jennifer had never thought about that since she lost her husband. All her energy was focused on raising the children and surviving. "I don't know, Mr. George. For now, my priority is the children." "I understand. But one day they will grow up and make their own lives. You mustn't forget to live yours." It was a conversation for another time, but Jennifer kept George's words in her heart. 6 months after the money distribution, Jennifer received an unexpected visit. It was Linda Patterson, accompanied by an older woman Jennifer didn't know. "Mrs. Jennifer, I want to introduce you to someone very special. This is my Aunt Ruth, my father's sister." "Very pleased to meet you, Mrs. Ruth." "The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Jennifer. Linda told me the whole story of the money you returned. I came here to thank you personally." They sat on the porch to talk, while the children played in the yard. "Mrs. Jennifer," said Ruth, "I want to tell you something. With the money my brother was entitled to, I was able to pay for a surgery I've needed for years. If it weren't for your honesty, Mom, I could have lost my eyesight." Jennifer was moved. She hadn't thought her decision could have such direct consequences on people's lives. "Mrs. Ruth, I just did what I thought was right." "But you saved my eyesight. How can I thank you for something like that?" "You don't need to thank me at all. Knowing I helped is enough." Ruth insisted on leaving a gift for the children, a box full of homemade sweets she had made herself. It was a simple gesture, but it touched Jennifer deeply. In the following years, many other families made similar visits, telling how the recovered money had changed their lives. Robert Mitchell managed to buy new equipment for his rural property. Dorothy Harris opened a small inn. Several children of the beneficiaries were able to return to school. "Mom," said Tyler, who was now 15, "have you ever thought about writing a book about this story?" "Why, son?" "Because it's a beautiful story, and it might inspire other people to do the right thing." Tyler's suggestion made Jennifer think. Maybe it really was worth documenting the whole experience, not out of vanity, but to show that it's worth being honest even when it's hard. She started writing in an old notebook, jotting down all the memories from the discovery of the money to the final distribution. George encouraged her, even offering to help with details she might have forgotten. "Mrs. Jennifer, this story needs to be told, not to praise you, but to show that there are still good people in the world." When the book was ready 2 years later, Jennifer decided to sell it in the region and donate all the proceeds to a local school that needed repairs. It was a way to keep giving back to the community, even without having any more hidden money to find. On the day of the book launch, organized at the very school that would benefit, almost the entire region attended. The families who had received the money back were all there, as were many other people curious to learn the story. "Mrs. Jennifer," said the mayor of Plainview during the ceremony, "you have become an example for all of us. In a time when there is so much talk of dishonesty, your attitude shows that there are still people you can trust." Jennifer was moved by the recognition, but she always made a point of reminding everyone that anyone could have made the same decision. "I'm not special," she would say to anyone who would listen. "I just did what my conscience told me to." Years later, when the children were grown and following their own paths, Jennifer often thought about how a desperate decision had transformed so many lives, including her own. Tyler graduated in law and always said he wanted to defend honest people like his mother. Brandon became a farmer and modernized the family property. Ashley became a teacher and returned to the region to teach at the local school. Emma, the youngest, was still studying, but already showed the same sense of justice as her mother. "Mom," said Ashley during one of her visits to the property, now married with a young child, Did you know your story is told in the region's schools as an example of honesty? Really? Really? My students are always impressed when I tell them I know the woman who returned the treasure. Jennifer smiled. The treasure had indeed been returned, but she had found something even more valuable in the process. The certainty that she had done the right thing and the satisfaction of having helped so many people. George, now over 70, still visited regularly. He had become almost a grandfather to Jennifer's children and a constant companion to her. "Mrs. Jennifer," he said one Sunday afternoon, watching the sunset from the porch of the now completely renovated house, "have you ever regretted any of this whole story?" Jennifer thought carefully before answering. "Sometimes I wonder what our life would have been like if I had kept the money. Maybe the children could have studied at better schools. Maybe I could have given them more comfort. But then I remember all the families who were able to rebuild their lives with the money that was rightfully theirs. And I remember how I sleep peacefully every night, knowing I did the right thing. That is priceless." And what would you say to someone in a similar situation? That doing what is right is not always easy, but it always leaves you at peace with your own conscience, and that sometimes the greatest rewards don't come in the form of money. As she spoke, Jennifer looked at the property around her. The house was in perfect condition. There was a thriving vegetable garden, some heads of cattle grazing in the field, and a sense of peace that no money could buy. The children had grown up honest and hard-working, inspired by their mother's example. The entire community respected and admired the Mitchell family, and dozens of other families had managed to rebuild their lives, thanks to the courageous decision Jennifer had made years before. In the end, she had bought a ranch for $3,000, thinking it would just be a place to start over. She never imagined she would find a hidden fortune, much less that returning it would bring an even greater reward, the certainty of having made a difference in the lives of many people. "Mr. George," she said, rising from the rocking chair, "I'm going to make some coffee. Today is Sunday, a day to be thankful for all we have." "I agree, Mrs. Jennifer, and we have much to be thankful for." When she entered the house, Jennifer said a small prayer of gratitude, as she did every day since she had made the decision to return the money she found. She gave thanks not only that her family was well, but that she had had the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of so many people. And so, on a property in the desert of Texas that had cost only $3,000, a widow with 4 children discovered that the greatest treasure was not the hidden money she found, but the peace of mind that came from returning it to its rightful owners. The story of Jennifer Mitchell became a legend in the region, passed down from generation to generation as proof that there are still people willing to do what is right, even when it means giving up a fortune that could change their lives forever. And every time someone questions whether it's worth being honest in a world full of dishonesty, the residents of the region tell the story of the woman who found $1 million and decided that doing the right thing was worth more than any amount of money. End of story. Dear listeners, what an incredible story we've just shared together. Now tell us, what did you think of Jennifer's decision? If it were you, would you have the courage to return a fortune that could transform your lives? Leave your honest opinions in the comments. We want to know what you think about this lesson in honesty. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.